Hello. You are listening to the Carroll Connection with your host, Jared Carroll.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Carroll Connection. I'm your host, Jared Carroll, here to bring you guys another great episode. Did want to take a chance to shout out my last episode 146 with Tyler Valerio. On that episode, Tyler came on the podcast and talked about being a veterinary technician and also talked about his road to sobriety and the last 2 years of being sober and like what that process has been like and kind of walking through his life story. It was a really powerful episode in my opinion. It's one of those episodes that makes me really reflect and like appreciate the podcast that I've created here and having genuine conversations with people. If you want to check out that episode, you can check it out at thecarrollconnection.simplecast.com, also Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the major listening platforms. If you'd like to watch that podcast, check it out on YouTube, search The Carroll Connection or at Jared Carroll. Should pop up right away. And if you want to be a guest or return as a guest, hit me up on Instagram at Jared Carroll or at The Carroll Connection, and we'll set that up. Summer's been busy, so just give me some time. I know I put a post out there trying to gather some people, so I know of some return guests that are interested in coming back. Just give me some time. Summer is hectic. I've already kind of booked most of the summer, so it's more fall time that I'll be looking and reaching out to people, so just be patient with me. I'll try to get at that. So that brings me to today's episode 147, bringing back one of my favorites from episode 101, Mark Furtado.
Hi. I will admit, the jingle that you have for the podcast is so catchy. I will admit there's some points like when I'll put on some random podcast, but like with yours, I'll like do it in the morning because it like gets my mind ready. But like, it's almost like, those like catcy jingles from the 90s. It's like, dude, and like the ending. And I'm like, oh, it just brings me back to reality.
Shout out to my boy, Devin Amaral. We actually, I remember when I was creating the podcast that he created the whole beat himself, basically. Mm-hmm. We hopped on his little piano and like typed in all the different sounds and shit. Mm-hmm. And the voice is just Siri, obviously. Yeah. We just got Siri to say the Carroll Connection, all that stuff. And I was like, because obviously I didn't want anything copyrighted. So like, I was like, I know there's free stuff out there, but I was like, there was something about just kind of creating our own intro to it. And it was just like a cool experience. And I wanted something like kind of like a little quirky and a little bit like, I don't know, just gives a little like even the backdrop was like psychedelic. I wanted some kind of vibe that was like hypnotic almost to it, and it just always worked out. And I've never really thought about changing it. It just kind of just like
don't change it.
Yeah, it's just kind of worked. It's kind of unique, and that's something that I've always
like that could be your ringtone. That's how good it could be.
I actually really appreciate that. That might be one of the first like face-to-face compliments that I've actually gotten on the intro, so I actually do appreciate that. But it actually has been a long time since you've been on the podcast, just over a year, I think.
Wow.
Yeah, because I was looking back on the time when we scheduled it, and it was the first episode that I had after my 100th episode, obviously 101 being after 100. So like that was like a huge event, and I obviously met you doing the collabs with like Ever Changing Vibe and stuff. Shout out to Gio as well with Off the Mic and now AOHD, what he's doing now. But shout out to those guys. Actually, I did a podcast with them that hopefully should be out, I think, by the time this episode's out. So go check that episode out if you want to hear me talk some more. But that's how we originally met. I got you on the podcast, talked about your business, and it was a great conversation. So kind of catch people up about what you've been up to over the last year. I know it's been a lot, but let's dive into it.
Yeah. Well, first, I got to give you your flowers first before we talk about me for keeping the grind going, because I know a lot of people tend to like burn out. Like they'll have this idea and like stick with it, and then like by 6 weeks later on they're like done with it, and then they're like, okay, what's next? So I gotta give you your flowers first before we talk about me. But yeah, so like it's been a year. So 101 we talked about family dynamic and all that, and like where it brought me today. So jumping off of that, so it was summer of last year. Let's talk about fall. So fall was, easy. I just started not really a new position. It was a new location for the same position, like for my real life work. It was great. Loved it. I will admit there was an opportunity that came up to work for this district, and I was kind of intimidated by it. The position got posted back in November. I just felt guilty in a sense of that I just made friends with a new boss. Well, it's the same position. It's just a new boss. So I'm like, I just made something with a new boss. I made a relationship with them, but I think it's time for a career move and just like go up from there. I've been doing what I've been doing as a secretary for 4 years. Um, and I was like, it's a lot more money. It's a bigger title. And I'd be like on the level of the Chiefs. Like I'd be sitting with them side by side and helping them. So I applied for it. I was like, what do I got left to lose? And the person that was in the position was going to leave forever because she had a baby. And she was like, I just want to be with my kids. So she encouraged me for the position because she's like, you've been doing this for 4 years. You're like the best one so far. Like, you'll be great. So then it was midnight. I still remember this day. It was midnight of December 8th. And I was like, you know what? The position's still posted. I'm just going to wing it and apply for it. And the next day I walk into my boss's office. I'm like, hey, before we even start the school day, can I have a one-on-one conversation? And so I discussed it, broke the ice, and I was like, hey, if the superintendent calls you in regards to my application, it's not personal. It's more of a career change for me and the money. And she was like, so supportive, but also she said, you'd be dumb enough to not take it if you're offered. And I was like, perfect. Glad we're on the same page. We see eye to eye. So now I'm in a new position. Now I'm an administrative assistant for the assistant superintendent. So that's where all the Chiefs are. I make a little bit more than double the money. And now, business wise, so fall was very easy breezy. It was definitely because we've never done a fall line before. Well, we have, but not as like my vision, I should say. And I should probably talk about my business, right?
Yeah. I was almost gonna interject and like make sure you introduce it too. I know we might have some new first time listeners. Obviously,
Yes,
I would reference
I
go
didn't
to
think about
101
that.
first and then probably listen to this. But for the people who just want to listen to this episode straight up,
So my name is Mark and I'm the Artisan, aka the Whale Tail brand. So our brand makes clothes that make an impact in a sense of 10% goes to save the oceans, but depending on what month it is, like autism awareness or mental health month, or I still have to do that, or just any particular month that I think that resonates with me or I think should be spotlighted, I will do a specific design for it and I'll donate 10% to that cause. But 75% of the time I donate to save the oceans. We're very lifestyle, so it's not anything special. It's more of casual, and the designs are made by me. And back then, I did all the work in a sense of like the production of the garments. Now I've alleviated from that. So this goes back to winter. Like we had just started fall, so like had just finished doing all the work for it, and so I did a ski lodge kind of New Hampshire kind of style collection, and I was like, I just want to be able to like do more than what I can. So I've reached out to a couple of different people who do screen printing slash garment printing in general. So I was like, oh, how would you feel about taking me on as a client as like for a small business? And luckily there was a dude in Freetown. I didn't realize that I had a mutual friend of with him. And he was like, I'll totally take it on. Just tell me like what's the garments and like what specific brand of shirts do you work with? And then we'll go from there and I'll do all the printing. He gives me like a slight discount than a traditional like client would do it, but also it's more local than it is to get it from China or like the West Coast. I was gonna say East Coast, West Coast. So yeah, so now everything that I've done has been different. I still do the marketing, I still do the social media, which is like I feel more comfortable with, but like the designs I still do on my iPad. But I feel a lot more, I should say, like secure with my business in a sense of like I don't feel as much pressure, if that makes sense.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Like, how am I going to say this? Like, it's not that I push my responsibilities on other people. It's more of I don't have to worry about the quality of the shirts now. It's more of I've already done samples of all the types of shirts, different brands, manufacturers, and all that. Now I can actually focus on the magic and like the the thought process behind each design that I've done now. So so right now we're in the summertime. So I've just launched last weekend the Kindness Cove collection. So what I've always wanted to do was to dive into swimwear, but I've been a little bit hesitant, so I just bit the bullet. And so now I have two bikini sets on there on my website. And I launched 17 new products all at once, which is our biggest launch ever. But Kindness Cove was more of an inspiration. So this collection kind of inspired the lodge first. So so Kindness Cove is basically a beach club somewhere on a tropical island. And it's very how I broke it down was think of like the old school vintage kind of Margaritaville style, but like my kind of flair. And yeah, so that's the Kindness Cove collection, but I also launched other t-shirts too, like different whale tails. Like I have like a boho one, I have a tie-dye one. Um, but my vision for summer was I needed color and I need to deviate from what I was comfortable with. I think that's like how I wanted to do it. And so yeah, so that's what I've been doing for the summer. Now I have to work on fall of this year. But even aside from the design work from the business, I think I had an epiphany of how to run things now. I feel like I have more of a grasp on what control is. I think diving into it was great and getting my feet wet. Now, after last year, I'm just like, I need to put the effort where it needs to be, but also if I know I'm not going to give it my 100%, I won't even do it until I feel alleviated from what I'm doing. Or knowing that I'm comfortable enough to step away for like 5 seconds to work on another thing and then go back to what I was doing. Um, but as a sense of like going to like how I said control, it's so I was being spontaneous one day and I was like, I need models. Not everyone has the same schedule. Like, I'll just put out an application. Whoever wants to do it, great. Um, and all that. And I think I've gotten over 30 applicants to do it. Like local, like I want to say from before the Cape, like right before the Sagamore Bridge. And if we're looking to the left side, all the way to Coventry. So like I've gotten like that from Coventry to like basically Wareham. That's where like I've gotten a lot of the applicants from. Um, Mostly women, but uh, like I was like I've never been in that position of the modeling. Like, how do I find like I've asked a lot of people, like people who have clothing businesses. I'm like, how do you get your models? Like, how do you do this? How do you do that? And they've all said the same thing. Just dive into it, put it out there, and someone will always respond to it. So I'm like, okay. So went on my website, did some website developing. I was like, okay, let me just make an application. But the only requirements I did was you had to be local. You had to be able to drive between Massachusetts and Rhode Island because I have like a list of venues of where I have my photos set. And also you should be able to drive to New Bedford for studio shoots for the website. I didn't do it for the summer only because I felt like the natural sunlight and the beach like setting made sense for the collection, but fall, winter, and spring, we're gonna do it in the studio, which now we're gonna dive into. So the co-creative. So I had an epiphany back in December. So people kept asking me what my life goal was with the business. Oh, do you ever want to own a store? Do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? I've always said no. I've always wanted to own someone else's company, but with with my business, I've always wanted it to go viral, but in a sense of through e-commerce, like viral on TikTok, viral on Instagram, viral on Facebook, and all that stuff, and just strictly be online because I didn't want to deal with the hassle of utilities. I didn't want to deal with like rent, leases, contracts. That just being tied to something freaks me out only because of not trust issues. It's more of I want to make sure that it's what I want to do before, like I don't want to commit to something that I know I might have doubts to. So I knew this organization in downtown New Bedford, the Co-Creative Center. So it's basically more for, it's a creative hub for artists, but artists not meaning fine artists. Like there's permanent jewelry person there. There's also artists that like painting. They even have like a gallery area that to showcase a new artist every month. But there's also like podcast rooms that you can rent out. There's also offices too. It's just one big building on there's 3 levels. The first main level is mainly just like for classes, the exhibitions, and then the other side of the building is more for like a workspace area if you just want to show up for 3 days outside of your life to just work on what you want to work on. Whereas like the other office spaces are more for like if you're there 24/7, and you just pay rent basically. Well, a subscription, but it's basically just a membership fee to be there. But you also have the organization behind you, like they represent you and like you have their support. So I did something with this organization maybe like a year before, like when I first started out, and I was like, oh my god, they do this, and my best friend Kayla and also Nicole, I looped her in, but mainly it was Kayla and I had a conversation. I was like, you know what? I didn't want to own a store, but like let's establish ourselves and do pop-up shops twice a Saturday, twice a month for a year, and let's just test it out, see where it goes. So ever since of November of last year till now, we've been doing pop-ups twice a month. But what we've been doing is for July and August, we have a summer residency. So every Saturday we'll be there from 10 to 3, right next to People's Press. And we're just having a pop up shop with me, Kayla, Nicole, and our friend Rachel, who does succulents. She grows them out of her own greenhouse in Westport. And we all get together. We just sell it together. We're not trying to like go under one name. We're just calling it like the co-creative pop-up. And it's just like us. And just testing the waters. Like I think ever since having that epiphany of like I kind of want to own my own store now, it's like now I feel like I've developed my voice of how I want my business to look, but also what I would want the store to look. But before I like make the commitment, I want to make sure I'm established where I am and have the support before I even jump into that, because there's a lot of factors to take in. Like you need capital to start it up, then you need to pay the rent, then you need to get the inventory for it, then you got to look at the displays, then you got to look at like there's just so many things to consider before opening up like a brick and mortar. So that's why I'm like, let's just test out the pop-ups. We pay our rent, we can be here 4 times a month anyway, so like let's get the value of our money anyway and just test it out. And just from the pop-ups alone, we've made over 4 grand, and we've been doing it since November. And so November, December, January, February, March, April, May, June, July. So in 9 months, we made 4 grand.
That's really solid. And I would say I've seen a lot of the events too on Facebook and stuff. Like
Yeah.
they pop up in my feed and stuff like that. That you're doing these, and like that's always like really impressive too, to even kind of go back onto like giving flowers to you for continuing to do something that's difficult. Like it's not every day that you come across someone that has that drive to continue to do something, and something where you're a lot more heavily invested than something like a podcast. Like you're selling merchandise, like you're creating a product basically to sell and distribute. And obviously I think having the cause that you do behind it, that you donate a lot of your proceeds to Save the Oceans and other organizations as well, like really makes it the authentic business that you're portraying. And I think that's going to always draw customers, and like especially with the area. And I've like definitely talked to you about this. Like it's like a perfect brand for the area. It's something that I could like, now that I've gone to Cape Cod, like that's something like I could see in like Cape Cod shops is like your brand. And like
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever thought about trying to branch out to Cape Cod eventually and like seeing that.
So speaking of that, branching out, so obviously I'm located in Westport. That's where I've started, and that's my residency as always. And till that building, like till 3 Gen Love, that's who I'm under. Until they leave, we're always going to be there. We're actually currently under reconstruction, like remodeling, I should say. And I'm actually gonna have like a huge space. So I'm actually gonna make it almost like a boutique within a boutique. So I'm actually gonna have like an actual area that you can actually engage with my stuff and have fun with. But going off of that, I've always in the Cape, there's this Kingston, Plymouth, basically, but it's borderline Cape. the store for Good Vibes. It's a big gift shop. Like they have so they're in Medford, Somerville, and now Kingston. And so they're in the Kingston Mall. They were just a gift shop at that point when I first met them. They've been following me for the past year and a half. They've been keeping up with my stuff. But they were like, "Oh, you should really join our Kingston location. Like clothing will do so much better there than it does our other locations because it's smaller. But definitely join us." So I joined them. It was good. Like it was it like clothing is just like you have your good days and your bad days with clothing. So that's why I'm like I stocked it so much that I wouldn't have to worry about it for a couple months. And then recently, back in March, they were like, "Okay, we bought the store across from us. It used to be like an outlet store for a big company. So we bought them. So now we're gonna have a boutique on one side. So it's just local clothing vendors, and we're gonna have a gift shop on the other, like on the other side of the mall, but across from each other. Um, and basically wherever you want your stuff is first come first serve. But other than that, we're actually gonna have like a boutique and showcase like local people. So I'm like, oh, okay, perfect. Definitely gonna hop on that. So now I have like exclusives there. So if anyone were to go, it's basically stuff that I don't have listed on my website. I have a couple stuff there that you can find on my website, but like I'm using that area to test out waters for like certain products. Like I have dresses there, I have crop tops, I also have some like overstock of some other like collections I've had in the past, but also like bestsellers too. Three Gen Love in Westport is more of like what's current or like what I want to be sold there. And then those are the only locations I'm at. But I also have a wholesaler that buys from me. In downtown New Bedford, she has a hair salon, but she has a boutique too. And I have some like New Bedford exclusive wholesale shirts, and then some other stuff too. I actually have to restock over there as we speak. But those are where I am currently. And then, but before I got into that hair salon, I got recognized in the newspaper.
I saw that. Congrats as well. That's awesome.
Wasn't expecting that. So yeah, so I'm recognized in the newspaper. Like I was in that headspace at that time. I was still like getting control over the business and like finding my voice. So that's why I was like, wow, like being recognized finally in my own hometown. So yeah, so I got recognized in the newspaper. But before that, going back to like my personal life, I got into a huge car accident. Not my fault. The dude brake checked me on the highway, so my whole front was smashed. I was fine. I walked away with a bruise on my palm. So I walked out untouched, but it also opened a door for me where it's like I don't want to say I got a lot of money. It was more of like I just used that money to pay off like half of my new car. And I got a new car. But yeah, and then even just like I said, even the way I've been running the business has been so much. I feel like I felt like I was spreading myself too thin early on, like in the year, and now that I've fully invested my time back into what I need to do, I feel like it's been I feel like I've been reaping the rewards from it. Like although my social media engagement sucks,
That's not your fault though. That's definitely like totally like Instagram's fault. Instagram is not great for interactions basically.
right? But it's definitely showing with like the orders online too, and even the pop-ups. Like I said, I've been so grateful with like who I've been doing it with too. But like I said, we've made $4,000 just being in downtown New Bedford. But also that doesn't mean that I don't want it to come off to people where it's like, oh, he's freaking rich. Like no, no. The numbers look so good, but also too there's a lot of it's constant reinvesting. So
Well, that's how you be successful too. If you're not reinvesting into what you do, then you're just
exactly like although it looks good profit wise, you got to think about it the other way where it's like, okay, now I got to launch a whole new collection, then I got to take like the expenses from that, and then I got to like make more profits off of it. So it's like constant.
It's never ending until you like really quote unquote made it, and even at that point, it's still never ending because you're going to obviously continually chase success. That's the whole goal of embarking on this whole journey of chasing a passion. In a sense, like you're going to continually to push for it. Like at the end of the day, and that's something that I would say I'm like really proud to say that you've done is like you really have seemed, at least on like the social media presence, that I feel like you really like kind of stepped into your own self basically with the
Mm-hmm.
business, like you're saying. And you've kind of, as you mentioned, you kind of like took yourself thin in areas, and you were not as like you kind of spreading yourself thin. You're doing a lot of things for
Mm-hmm.
not only your business but like friends and doing other things
Mm-hmm.
that you were kind of had to check out and focus on just you again and
Mm-hmm.
focus on your content. And I
It was
think that's
almost like I had
important.
to. So how I looked at it was like I feel like I had to break up with myself to like get back with myself.
Mm,
Um, yeah, like when I spread myself too thin early on, like meaning helping out like other podcasts with other friends and all that stuff. But um, it was great during that time. But I think I knew my business was suffering with like its own factors of like engagement and all that stuff, and even just like the portrayal of the business itself like was just hindering. So I was like, you know what, let me just step away. And I mean, life took its toll too. Like it was almost as if it was kind of like cosmic, like it was supposed to happen, like just to drift away. And I listened to my intuition for that, and I'm glad that I did what I did for it to be where it is now. um
It's one of those things that you learned what you need to learn. You experienced what you
mhm.
did. It was good when you were doing it, and then you were
Right.
able to apply the things that you've learned to your own business and
Mhm.
take that and kind of run with it. And
Yeah.
it shows in not only just the work, but like
Mhm.
even just like your growth as a person. Like
Mhm.
you're really more focused on continually pushing your brand as you should.
Mhm.
And even just like our private conversations, we first had the podcast. I was like, do like focus on you, focus on
Mhm.
your stuff, because like what you have is a great business and a great business model
Mhm.
where you're not only have a great product, but you're doing it for a good cause on top of that,
Mhm.
which when you think about that aspect too, when you're donating stuff, that also takes away from your profits. Like
Mhm.
people like might not even consider that like that part of the financials is
Mhm.
like yeah, you're doing a good thing, but you're also like
Mhm.
not collecting profit on that. As a business
Right.
person, that's always a tough thing to do, but
Mhm.
it's for a good cause at the end of the day. So it's one of those
Exactly.
things.
Right. And then I was actually gonna bounce off of that. I'm trying to find before I lose the train of thought. I'm trying to see where the train is located in my head. Um, my God. I was oh dang it. It's gonna come back to me. I know it's gonna come back to me. Uh, but no, but like how you just said it, it was I like it was almost like listening to your intuition. It was just like I there was a gut feeling where I was like, you know what? Let me just like reinvest into the business again. Like not reinvest with money. It was just more like what are the areas that are hindered and how can I go about that? And that's when I started the model application. And then um luckily with stepping away too, I've made so many good connections too. Like I don't want to sound
Connections
arrogant.
that could be good on the podcast.
Sort of. So with these applicants that came through, like obviously it's like girls that I graduated with. Like I knew their personality and I was like, perfect, I'll have like great. I'll have like it'd be an honor to like, have you a part of my business. But also like there was a couple applicants where so I didn't know this existed in New Bedford. It was Miss New Bedford. It was like the pageant.
Mhm.
There's like Miss Teen, Miss then there's like the Miss. Um One of them was a former Miss New Bedford, but was also a former Miss Fall River, Liv Marks, and she applied. So during the application, it's like you got to submit photos, you got to submit like like why do you want to do this? It's not like you're just taking a photo and that's it. Like there's like things that come with it. Um, and so she applied for it, and I got her on board, and we did our first photo shoot for spring, and I was like astonished by her. I'm like, how are you even have time for what I'm doing? And like she's getting engaged, which I'm so happy for, but also like I mean married. She's already engaged, but she's getting married, and then also too she's like doing stuff with theater kids, and she's also doing like her own like she works too. She's a teacher, and like she just has so many like she's doing so many things, but it's also like great things. But also to bounce off of that, the current Miss New Bedford found out from her that she's been doing stuff with me, and now she's wrapped up in my business. So Tori is now part of my business. She's the current Miss New Bedford. She's around my age actually, and she's so ground like she's one of those girl. It's like the girl next door that you want to like hang out with. So it's like her personality was like amazing, and we've found a lot of like relatable points too, because I was never in the pageant world. I don't know anything about it. And she kind of like went like, paraphrase what it's about and all that stuff. And I'm just like, I was just like, wow. It's, I don't want to say like I made it, but like, it was like a little bit of that like feeling of like, damn, like I'm recognized. um, but also too, like she's awesome. Like just as a person, like she's so kind, but also she talked to me personally and she was like, I want to do more stuff with local businesses. And I think with yours, it just makes sense to do it with the like how your business is ran, but also too, it's like it's stuff that I would wear. And I was like, okay, like that's fine. I'll take it. I'll take what I can get. And I also have Bridget. That's also on my brand too. I graduated with her. She's so like, she's one of those girls that she's so lax. Like nothing phases her, I should say. But yeah. So basically like a quick timeline. It's like basically I had my epiphany. Well, I had my epiphany. Had the car accident. Then changed the way I do things, got models in, and then now we're in the summertime, which is like our prime time. And I will admit, not to like, I was gonna say not to my own horn, but like I'm trying to like have. So my coworker has always said, don't say that because like you should be able to toot your own horn and be proud of what you've done. So like ever since we've launched the summer like launch and all like the other t-shirts, I've been like getting so many orders from that. Like spring was very a weird month too, like weather wise, so there wasn't really much going on. And I didn't really release too many things. I think it was like 4 or 5 items. Um, but also too like I said, I want to take advantage of summer, so I did like a huge photo shoot with each girl. Um, to the point where the other day I was like, Bridget, can you take photos of me? And she's like, wait, what? she because she knew that I don't take pictures of myself like that, and I was like, yeah, like I think it's my time to step in the spotlight for once and just like show off my brand too and post it and have a grand old time. So like it was like 7:30 at the beach in Fairhaven, and we just like I only did the hoodies and t-shirts, like some of the t-shirts, and it was such like I don't think I've had that much joy since I first started the business, I think, because it's like I finally found who I was, and now I'm just like, if it doesn't bring me joy or if it doesn't bring me like that sense of fulfillment, then not to say that I'm going to throw it out, but also like I won't acknowledge it, if that makes sense. And then I think also like the mental health thing too. Like I feel like I'm in a better standing now than where I was a year ago.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then like I wanted to let you get that point out too about that because I think that's an important thing. And I think the fact that you've kind of been like reignited with the brand, and I think that's super important. Like, what would your advice be for someone that's like kind of struggling within their own brand? Because I think you've kind of been able to kind of reset and refocus to like kind of re-engage with what they're doing as their passion to like
Mhm.
kind of like kind of self motivate almost. Like, how would you advise someone, or how would you advise even you're like, if that is like a harder question to advise like yourself when you were like about a year ago to get you kind of back it like
Mhm.
remotivated to push the brand again.
Hmm. Like I don't want to say like what worked for me is going to work for everyone. Like not to be cheesy, like I started meditating, did some sound healing, kind of went almost like the stereotypical like when people like are in a bad environment go like the Buddhist route and like get have that woke moment where it's like, oh, I'm a Buddhist now, like oh my god, I do a lot of healing and do that. Like I didn't want to like go that route, but I started trickling in some like meditation like moments, and then also even just like have that self-talk of like self check-ins. It's like I would stop what I was doing and it's like, okay, if I feel tired, I'm tired, that's it, I'm gonna go to bed, like, or like just even take a nap and just step away from what I'm doing, because I need to like start acknowledging how you feel, but also like you need to put yourself in the mindset of like what do you want to do a year from now. Don't even like set yourself up and do like 5 year or 10 year. Just be like, okay, what do I want to get done next year, and how am I going to do it? Or even just not even think about the how. just do like little baby steps of like what the end goal is. So like let's like for me it was to include way more color, do swimwear, and also like take a different approach to the business. And it was like, okay, let me start, you know, not rebranding. It's more of like redesigning certain things, like whether it's the business cards or the thank you cards. And then it was like, okay, for designs, like what's the concept, like what's the intent, like what's the intention behind of what I'm doing, like because with the Kindness Cove collection, it was more of I wanted that sense of like vintage, but like my way, but also something that you could wear out and about and like do your stuff with, but also be cute to wear at the beach and like as a cover up. So that was like kind of my mentality. And I was watching like a lot of 80s movies too to get that kind of inspiration of like how like the color theory behind it too, like um even like music too, like music's been helping me too for inspiration, um but also like for going from like creating a concept but also to like with the intention, like what I've been noticing is if I put something with intention, it comes out great. If you don't, if you do something unintentionally, or no, it was gonna come out wrong the way I was gonna say it. I think people need to start doing things with intention. Like, what are you trying to put out there? Because I feel like it's not your authentic self if you're doing it unintentionally. I want to make sure I didn't confuse myself.
No, I was following. I was like, let him cook.
Yeah. Like for a second there, I was like, my brain wasn't braining for a second, but then I managed to like.
I knew the point you were getting to. I just wanted to let you get there and like cook it up. And I was like, I know he's got it. Like I gotta let it, because like it's true though. Like if you go into stuff just like, and this even off the point earlier that you were just making too, is just like planning and goal setting. Like it's so important. And like in the midst of this podcast that I flash back to of my struggle days of like 2020, going through a lot of my relationship problems at that point and like really struggling through that and like trying to really figure out what this podcast was. And like, even with, losing my grandfather late in 2020 and having hit the episode with him and like really kind of going through a lot of that trauma was like valuable. But for what really worked was that cliche kind of like meditation and stuff like that. Like you said, the healing, like getting towards that, like self check-ins, like if you don't want to do it, don't do it. And I've been a lot better at that lately with the podcast. Is like, if I don't want to do an episode, I'm not going to do an episode. And I think for me now too, I've referenced, if you want to hear me talk more about a little bit about my relationship publicly, I talked a little bit about Ever Changing Vibes episode about this, and I'll start probably being more open about that a little bit on the podcast. But at the same time, having that time to kind of just be with my girlfriend, be away, and like save time for that, and like actually do more things. Cause like I'm coming up on 4 years of doing this podcast. I dedicated like
I'm coming on 3 years.
It's like crazy when you think about how much time you dedicate. Like I usually average anywhere from 30 to 40 episodes, 30, 40 weeks out of the year. I'm talking to people and doing new episodes. And like, I started reflecting on that. And like a lot of the solo episodes that I was doing weren't really like, were like very unintentional going into it, because they were just spontaneous. Someone would cancel. I'm like, all right, just got to do content.
Right.
And that wasn't very me. That wasn't what I wanted to. I would make it sound good and it'd be okay to digest as a listener, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. It wasn't the goal of the podcast. So getting back towards that was important. And I think that's a really important thing to lay out there, is really what we're talking about here is planning and goal setting. I think that's like super important when you have a passion, and especially when you're in that passion, you're doing it for multiple years, to recheck in on that goal and figure out if that goal is still serving you, because it's okay if that goal changes. Pivot and rotate. Like it's just like you just keep going and changing and developing, and it's important.
And even too, like what I recently did was I added on my Instagram was like, it's like LGBTQ plus owned. Like I feel like that was almost like a coming, like when I found myself from that, like of the whole like redesign, like finding my way and finding my voice. I think it was also like kind of like coming out as a business. I already came out as a person, but it was like almost like coming out again, but as a business, and just like being proudly owned as that too. Cause it's like I've had this talk with Gio, and he even said, oh yeah, like I understand, like you don't want to be niche about that too. Cause like a lot of people like tend to sell stuff like, and just have like the that kind of category, and just be like, oh, you should shop with me because I'm this, or you should shop with me because I'm that. And I want to break that tie where it's like, no, I don't want to be associated with that. But also too, I think it was just to not be afraid of that either. Because I think a little bit of that mindset was a little bit of the fear. And then also too, like I talked to someone this week and they even told me, they're like, something about, it was like a quote about fear. I'm going to paraphrase it, but it's like, don't like, like look at fear in the face, but don't let it take over. Like you can stare at it, you can even like look at it, but don't let it overshadow or even overcome you, because then you're just gonna put yourself in a hole that you can't get out of. So I've been trying to keep that mentality of just to not be afraid to do certain things, or even just like anything actually. Like with swimwear, like I was always afraid of it because I didn't know, like I don't have a woman's body. I don't know what looks good and what doesn't look good. Although I have a certain taste, but not everyone wears my taste. Not everyone has that same kind of mentality. So that's when I started dabbling and I started asking questions. I even did some stuff on my business story where it's like, okay, what, like, do you want patterns, not patterns? Do you want this cut, or like, do you want more coverage? Do you want this? Do you want that? Do you want support? Like on the breast area? Like, how do you want to wear your bikinis? And luckily, like that blew up. Like I didn't realize like how many people like would want a swimwear collection from me, only because like I just never have thought, like I always thought t-shirts, hats, hoodies, and maybe even like accessories like tote bags or like cups or something like that. But that's it. I was trying to put myself in like a limited area. But then when I talked about swimwear, everyone was like all about it. And I was like, oh, okay. I guess I'm just gonna do it. And then I just did it.
And it really fits like the brand and stuff. And I like to hear that you kind of acknowledge like coming out as a brand. Cause I remember when we first did the episode, like you were very like adamant on not tying the two. That you were like, I am more than just this. Like I don't want to make this the whole episode.
Like you can be more than just that, but
Exactly.
also like acknowledge that and be aware of like that is also you too. Like don't try to put, it's like with breaking up yourself, like you need to know that it's there. Like you can't run away from it either, because it's always gonna be there. So I think like it's more of like just taking that, like I said, like I found my control and I found my voice of just like, yeah, that's my ownership, but also I'm more than that, and I've proved that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that I was actually really like, because I'm always like very try to make my guests comfortable with whatever they want to talk about, obviously, and I don't want to overstep boundaries. But I think it was cool to hear you kind of talk about that too. Is like that you're just like you're more than that. Like there's more to you than just being part of the community. Like, and I think that's like important as like a message, because I think a lot of people, in whatever community you are part of, that could be the identity and the only identity for a lot of people, and like that becomes it can become dangerous too, because
Right.
you can really just get sucked in and not be your individual self, and that's important
Exactly.
to really show that, and you show that through your business, like who you actually are, and like even just mentioning like taking the photos of yourself, really starting to like be the face like that you want to be. And I think that's cool to see that confidence grow from where we were last year to now, and I think that's like really dope to see you kind of taking that initiative and like really pushing the business where you want it to go, 'cause
Or
it's
even
on
just,
you.
and it's also too like you need to reword how you say things too. I think that's what like a big thing I've been learning is when people would talk about my business, it's like, oh yeah, it's nothing special. Like I would always say it's nothing special, or it's like, yeah, it's small, but like that's it. Like that would just end it there, and just I feel like it's like almost like manifesting. Like it's like in order for you to get big, you have to like start talking big a little. Don't spin that. It's more of like if you want to be big, you'd be like, I want to be the biggest business, or like I want to succeed in that, or it's more of like rewording what your intention is. So like what I've been doing now is like, yeah, I have a small business. Yeah, it's not as big as where I want it to be, but one day I want it to be big. Or even simple words of just like, yeah, I have a small business and I appreciate what I do. Like just show, it's almost like that study that they did with like freezing water. They did one tray where they spoke negative words and then one tray with positive words. And you can even, when they did the microscopic photos, it was the negative one had all these like spikes and all that stuff, whereas the positive one, it was like all like beautiful snowflakes and all that stuff. Like it's just like that common sense of you need to start like caring for yourself, not to be like, don't care for yourself in a sense of you put too much ego on you, or like you're this one big person. It's not that. It's more of you need to acknowledge who you are, how you feel, reflect, but also take that and move forward and do better with yourself. Then that also dabbles into the mental health side too. Like you have to like learn to be self-aware of yourself, and also of others, but you need to be a little bit selfish to yourself too. Like, yeah, be empathetic and be sympathetic too to like your friends and family and how they feel and what they're going through. But also too, they're not mind readers and they need to know what you're going through too. Not to like out yourself either of certain scenarios. Like, obviously, if you're going through some domestic stuff, like don't out that, but also like find help for it. Just the step of finding help or just finding the resources is already the biggest step because you're already acknowledging yourself of what you're going through. Like for me, yeah, I didn't go on that big level of like finding therapy or anything like that. It was just like I knew what was going on, I knew what I was feeling, and I needed to break away from myself and like find my voice in order to come back to where I am.
Yeah, I think it's really important too that you hit on when you're talking about that, the ego aspect too, because like the manifestation is important to have, but then the dangerous part is not crossing over too much into that ego space where it becomes like narcissistic and selfish to the point where that you think that you're better than you actually are. Because I think reality checks for your own self is important, but speaking stuff positively is so important. I remember one of the most important lessons that I learned when I was in therapy a few years ago was when I was talking about the podcast, I was always talking about it being something. And my therapist would always remind me, as Jared, it already is something. That's the important thing to remember. And the more that I've done this, just like the more that I appreciate every week that I talk to someone new. And like the weeks that I don't do it, always reminds me of why I want to do it.
Right.
And then every once in a while, you get one of those episodes, like my last week's episode 146 with Tyler. Just one of those ones where like it was just so uniquely different than what I was used to, where having to talk to someone about sobriety and stuff like that, and to hear him kind of talk about openly like the drug use and talking about alcohol and like how he even helps animals and how animals helped him get over his addiction and problems and stuff like that. And just one of those episodes you don't come across often. And it was different than the stereotypical, not to knock on my nurses, but like the nurse stories or like not to knock on my own stuff, podcasts, or like similar like that. But it's nice to have that.
Like even when I talk about like that kind of journey that like, it wasn't really like a huge journey as if it took years and years and years to figure out. It was more of like, for me to have that kind of era or like season of me trying to like find myself and all that, when I like, when I talk to my coworker or like certain people, they're like, how are you 23 and you've already like went through like a midlife crisis already? And it's like I don't know, I think I'm just more wise than like I'm wiser than what I think I am, but also too it's just being self-aware. Like if you know you're not doing well or if you know you're not feeling it, then why you keep pushing yourself doing it? It's like you're carrying dead weight, or like you have shackles on your ankles and you're just trying to carry something that shouldn't be there. Or even just not even being there, it's more of just acknowledge that it's there and make it better. Or maybe not even make it better at all. Just like break the stem from it and just go another way and pivot, like you said.
Yeah, it's a lot of it is like the correction in our society of like hustle grind culture, where it's crossed over that line where people just like push, keep going, and like I've had moments where I agree and I have moments where I disagree, and I've kind of always like kind of come back to the point. I mean, it's always stereotypical, it's cliche.
Like push in moderation, like
yeah, I was gonna say yin yang, like it's balance. Like that was the point that I was gonna get to. It's
like
balance.
If you want to be successful, obviously you got to keep pushing yourself and like pushing stuff out. But if it comes to a point where it's just not sustainable to you, or you just know, like you'll have that gut feeling that where you know it's not doing well, don't even bother anymore, and just like be proud of what you've done in the past and just acknowledge it. Like, hey, that's what was me, or that was like my business, or that was what I used to do. But now I just want to be myself and just like live my life normally, or like take a new take on life and just live it the way I want it.
Yeah, I think a great example was the episode when I brought Wally and Gio on, and Gio came on and talked about off the mic and mic him up and stuff, and pivoting to AOHD. It's one of those things where it's like kind of what you're saying is when something no longer serves you, you don't have to just scrap it completely. Take what you learned and reapply it to something that you really want to do. Like you never know where life could take you and how things change. Like life is dynamic. It's always going to have different variations. And something that I've come more into is like life's gray. It's not black or white. It's gray. Like there's a ton of gray area where things are just different. It depends on the person, the situation, like timing, like just everything. There's so many variables to it. And I think the more that I've gone through the journey of content creation and podcasting and talking to people and my own personal life struggles up and down, that you just got to enjoy the process too. Like you said, if you're not enjoying the process, like take that time to like be self-aware, reflect, remove yourself for a little bit. Sometimes a little bit.
Like, don't be afraid to know don't be afraid to know that of what you're feeling. I think that's what it, like with the fear thing. It's like, don't be afraid of it. Like, if anything, embrace it and look at it in the face, but also walk around it and keep going.
Yeah, because like at that point, even like relating to like the Buddhism stuff, like sometimes you have to pull out and just be like a monk, be like a Buddha, like be by yourself, check out for a little bit,
Like a hermit, yeah.
yeah, and then recheck in when you're ready to. Like it's important not to. That's but when you check out, like that's the fine line with the mental health stuff. You don't want to lean too far because then you can get depressed and things like that can happen.
Like I've had
so.
like during that journey, like that season, I've had my moments where like I'll put like some like some like what do you call it? Like emo music. Like I had my moments. Like trust me, like it's not all like peaches and cream over here either. But also, like I said, it's just like, it's the simple step of just acknowledging it and wanting to go forward too. Like you have to want to. That's where you'll have to want to move forward too. Like if you don't want to move forward, but you also don't want to like look back either, then clearly you need to have that. You need to have that moment of reflection, and that just takes time too. Like for me, I found it quicker because I've had my ups and downs even on my personal life. Then being with the business, I'm taking what I learned from my personal life into it. So like it's kind of quicker for me to like figure that out. But not everyone has that light bulb moment. But when that light bulb moment happens, it's more of don't be afraid of the past and acknowledge it, but also don't take it with you. But just know that that was you, but keep going. Like deviate from that. Even if you have to like reword things like, oh yeah, that used to be me, but now I'm this. Or like, I don't want to be that anymore. I want to be this. And just like keep manifesting. Basically just putting words out into the universe and it'll come true. And just know what you want, and also just don't be selfish. Like, not just don't be selfish, but like be selfish for yourself, but don't let it go to the point of narcissism and the good stuff.
Yeah, just don't cross the line. Basically,
Yeah, just
it's
don't
like,
cross the line.
It's important to have that self check and all those things. We are getting towards the end of the podcast, but as we wrap up, I do want to give you the floor to kind of talk about anything future you have planned that you want to talk about a little bit quickly, or just like future things that you have planned, and then we'll close up.
Yeah.
I don't have any like last questions like the first time, so kind of giving the floor to like plug your stuff, like talk about any future plans and shit like that.
Yeah. So you can find me at the Artisan NB on Facebook and Instagram if you're on that side. But if you want a direct link, it's the artisan-nb.com. Basically, all of our stuff is unisex. Anyone can shop our brand. I have sizes from smalls to 3Xs. There's going to be a lot more stuff coming through. I invested in an embroidery machine early this year, so like I'll have some stuff like like kind of bougie, like with little touches and all that. I also have a lot more designs coming out. Like I said, if I launch 17 for summer, who knows what fall's going to look like. But also, basically just be yourself and keep going. Like I said, when I found myself after spreading myself too thin, like I don't want to. I'll address the elephant, I guess. So like, I didn't fall into a hole after Ever Changing Vibe. Love you, Brandon. Love you, Gio. You guys are great. It was just like life took its toll, and I just needed to reinvest into what I needed to get done. Like it was more like I need to prioritize myself first before prioritizing other people. And I think acknowledging that is what I needed to break up with myself and then love myself again. And then now I am where I am. But yeah, like, just like I said, just do things with intention, but also be self-aware.
I think it's a perfect way to wrap up. And Mark, I appreciate you coming on the podcast. It's always great catching up. We spent like an hour and a half just like before we even started. And I'm like, oh shit, we should probably do a podcast, like the podcast before a podcast. But I always appreciate you coming on the podcast, and you're always welcome to come back on the podcast and chat it up. So appreciate you. For the listeners, you guys like the podcast, please rate, review, subscribe, share it with your friends, share it with your family, share it with your grandma. Check it out, the carrollconnection.simplecast.com. Also available Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the major listening platforms. If you like to watch your podcast, go on YouTube, search it, the Carroll Connection or at Jared M. Carroll. Should pop up. You want to come on the podcast or return as a guest, go on Instagram, Jared M. Carroll, at the Carroll Connection. We'll set it up. So until next time, guys, peace.